So, oh boy, did I pick a hell of a weekend to, stop making videos about the news. I don't know. I had a great weekend, but, maybe we didn't have a great weekend, the Bidens. Now, it's tough to talk about this from an angle that maybe hasn't been discussed before. Because, honest to God, Tucker Carlson has been on top of it. The Bobulinski interviews dropped. Or interview. It's a big long interview. This story is constantly changing, and by the time you watch this video, there's going to probably be more information that's going to further corroborate, tie someone else in. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's actually pretty amazing in the grand scheme of things, just how fast this news cycle is moving. Granted, the news cycle always moves really, really fast. That like last week before a major election. But this is exceptional. And not only that, it doesn't seem like things are actually being held back. What it seems and being released, day after day, as much as the facts are actually in evidence are piling up and kind of just happening almost in real time. I mean, Tucker Carlson had some documents basically either stolen or destroyed or something. It seems like he mailed it. He implied it was basically FedEx, and he had mailed it priority mail. And at some point in its transit, FedEx noticed that basically it had been opened, and they started an immediate investigation. Started talking to them, and they don't know what the hell happened. So basically, somebody stole some pretty damning documents for the Bidens. How did they know? Well, it's probably because Fox has leakers within Fox. They're not. Fox isn't the secure fortress of the right wing sitting in the middle of New York. That's not how things work. And this basically somebody leaked the information, and someone had the resources to intercept what was going on. Now, what's happening here? Why are we seeing this whirlwind of chaos and of conflicting? It's not conflicting narratives as much as it's just conflicting. Some people are covering the story, and some people are just dismissing it outright because they just don't want to know. It's a complicated story. It really is. What's not complicated is basically just saying Joe Biden was on the take, and Hunter Biden is a kitty diddler, and he was being blackmailed by the Chinese, and Joe Biden's compromised. But it is complicated to get into the details and the weeds of what was going on. You'll hear people like Juan Williams on the 5 who would just completely straight-faced tell you, there's no problem here. Everything is fine. It's been debunked. That's not true in any sense, but Democrats have to tell themselves that. Otherwise, they, have to admit to themselves that they're voting for a monster. And, it's a lot like the Biden dementia stuff, where just he's losing it. Like you can tell there's so much evidence of that. That whether it's dementia setting it or not, the guy's too old to be doing what he's doing, and because he just doesn't have the mental faculties. But can't talk about that. The guy, basically, he initially had called a lid for about the week before, but him doing not really even campaigning this last month. Just showing up at really small events and stuff, almost like he doesn't want the presidency. It's looked at completely different by one partisan set and not by the other. Normally, if Trump's making a tactical mistake in terms of politically, you'll actually hear the murmurs from the libertarian right and even the neutral to never Trump right. They will straight up criticize whatever his tactic is and explain why. Sometimes they're wrong, but they'll talk about that. They'll discuss when they think their guy's making a mistake because they want to encourage them to make, basically make better choices or change something, or at the very least complain about what's happening, right? Because Trump doesn't always do things that all of us like. But with the left, with Biden, it's like no matter what Biden does, they just anoint it, and they're like they praise it. Not campaigning for a month before the election, like just the week before, showing up in Chester County for 36 people while horns get honked at you. Uh, it, it's silly, right? It seems laughable, and you should be complaining as a Democrat, demanding better from your. Sure, you don't want to smear Joe, but you could at least pretend like it's not his idea. Be like, hey, whoever's running the campaign, they need to get him out here so he can be out there campaigning, acting like he really wants this because we really want this for him, right? Whatever. It's like watching two different worlds, watching CNN versus watching what's actually occurring, what's actually in the news. So what are we seeing? We're seeing a number of things, but what we're seeing is essentially two parties, freaking the hell out because of the fact that basically the mask is coming off and the wheels are coming off of the horse they bet on, and now the curtain's dropping. The media is having a lot of trouble containing this, and a lot of this has to do with the internet, hence the big tech censorship. Go ahead, use Google. Even if you use DuckDuckGo and stuff, it almost seems like that the ISPs are basically having a certain amount of influence. You can't search for certain things. Remember, I guess this was last week. I talked about the guy's name. I think it was Lude or Ludi, Chinese guy. He's talking about the 3 hard drives, and he's going on and on. And I said, I don't know if it's true. They seem pretty damn confident it's true. Well, it turns out it's true, and it's actually worse than what he was describing, which is wild. In fact, the only thing that hasn't played out that he's talked about is essentially the bioweapon stuff. And the more evidence we get, the more it seems like that's the case. But the U.S. government does have a reason not to focus on that at the moment because, starting a war with China or taking risks like that, particularly right before there's a possibility of an election shift, basically a power shift, that's just dangerous for everybody. You don't want to do that. You want to enter a war. You want to enter essentially accusations that could lead to a war on your own terms. Right this second is really not the time to do it. You may disagree with that. That's fine, but I'm just telling you what the grander apparatus is thinking, because there's a lot going on with this coronavirus stuff. And the media, is if there's an election going on, will not cover the truth. After this election, possibly they may be able to be convinced to actually cover what's going on. But until their guy basically is completely defeated, they have no incentive to basically try to help President Trump by proving that the Chinese are doing stuff. So that aside, what's going on here? You've got the Chinese, the Communist Party of China. It would be the Chinese Communist Party. Sorry, CCP. I'm like, acronym wasn't matching what I was saying. And then you've got the Democratic Party, and they're tied. They're completely interlinked, and they're completely interlinked because pretty much since the 90s, the Chinese picked their horse. They got the nuclear secrets from Al Gore. They got all kinds of stuff. And they basically, Dianne Feinstein's driver, you name it. The Chinese Communist Party have basically bet on the Democrats. And I'm sure Republicans are tied into this too. But in terms of structurally, the people who are still around, most of the Republican apparatus is fresh. Bush-era people have retired. Not everybody, but the Bush-era people have, for the most part, retired. The neocons have been pushed out and have gone full never Trump, if not just moved to the Democrat apparatus. And the Trump people are brand new. Trump had some dealings in China. I mean, he sold things to China, not the country, but in China to Chinese citizens. He did travel there, even as late as I think it was 2013. They wanted him to build some stuff. He looked around. He didn't like the fact that basically the Chinese government takes ownership. And also, I'm sure they tried to, they probably tried to honeypot him and his kids, and he got spooked, and he said, all right, we're getting the hell out of here. and he was just a celebrity, right? Smelled bad, he left. The Bidens, however, and the Democrats, it seems they get roped in a lot easier. Whether it's essentially prostitution, cocaine, or just straight up money, like the way it is with what was with Joe Biden, the Chinese Communist Party has essentially blackmailed by hugging the Democrats so tight that it's almost like they're indistinguishable from the CCP, because the CCP does this to their own people as well. They want to make sure you stay in line. The way they do it is they get the kind of info and videos they need to kick you out. And you'll see this many, many, many times. Lots of people in China, particularly high profile Communist Party members, they go to jail for corruption or they say it's almost like treason to the party. And all the time this horrible stuff comes out, and you think, oh my God, how long have these people been doing this? And it's because if you get out of line or become out of favor, or the person above you or below you basically wants to now advance and you're in the way, they'll stab each other right in the back. Or if it's for the greater interest of China, they will sacrifice you. And they always have dirt. They always have dirt. One minute they'll be singing your praises, and the next minute they'll be releasing a photo of you kid diddling. Because that's, anybody they can rope into that. It's a trade-off. One, you're at the mercy of the Chinese party, Communist Party. But two, they feel more comfortable giving you money and opportunities because they know they can pull the rug out from under you at any time. It's like doing something at gunpoint. And many people, particularly if they get on, a cocaine binge or a meth binge, they take the bait. They get honeypotted, and they'd rather not deal with it. So they just take the communist money. They live like millionaires for a while, and some of them it's perfectly fine. Some of them move up the chain. Other ones, basically, if you step out of line or become useless to them, they just say, "Oh my God, we've discovered corruption." That's how the Chinese keep their people in check. The Democrats, they could, in a lot of cases, throw people under the bus for certain things, but it really isn't the typical MO to just straight up, focus on blackmailing people. Not that there's not elements that do that. There absolutely is elements who do that. But there's enough of a party apparatus, and also since there's outside forces competing against them, they have to. They don't want to. The blackmail isn't as valuable, because if you create the blackmail, then guess what? The opposition party is going to be trying to dig it up too. So it's a much harder operation to run. But if you have a single party system like in communist China, well then you have no incentive not to run things that way, because it's much more effective. It keeps people. I mean, nothing's going to keep somebody in line quite like holding over their head, photos of videos of them doing something like really depraved, or okay, maybe they were high, maybe they were drugged. It doesn't matter. It ruins their life, and you just keep baiting them. And then when it comes time, they can pull the rug out if they need to. Because they don't need to necessarily do that. Because if you're doing their bidding, then guess what? You get to live like a maniac, and they're fine with it. But the second you become not useful enough, or you're in somebody's way who's more important than you, well then, all of a sudden you go to jail for corruption. And it also is a good way for them to consolidate power. It's kind of like Stalin did this, Saddam Hussein did this, where like, oh my God, the Ba'ath Party around him, just the corruption, the terrible things. We have to throw these people in jail and execute them. And, the only person we can trust here is the leader, Saddam, or in this case, Xi, and then the power consolidates. That's how they operate. Now, while that's going on, while this has been essentially happening at more and more rapid pace in China, the Democrats have basically tied themselves to them. And the Democrats are caught up in this. Some people were saying like, "Oh, Obama took a piece of the money." I don't know. I don't know about Barack. Barack doesn't need to. He didn't need to. He was already president of the United States. He's going to be wealthy off of his name alone. He could just write 5 memoirs and he'll live better than he. People will just give him things. It doesn't matter for him. He liked the pomp and circumstances. He really didn't. I don't think had time for the wheeling and dealing. He wasn't a very good negotiator either. So big surprise, right? His ambition was just to look cool. And for the most part, that was being served. Valerie Jarrett was running his main policies and stuff. Biden was the one who was running out there, enriching himself. And he wasn't the only Democrat tied into this, and that's what's kind of scary. There's a lot of money moving around. There's people like John Podesta involved. There's infighting. There's emails being dropped, and then the most disturbing thing I'm finding, in fact, we'll talk about Miles Taylor later. I'm actually going to jump to this first. US Marshals are still making major arrests, finding, dozens of kids. They're saying they're arresting Johns. They don't really give the full details, and in fact, they don't even say whether the people they're arresting are nationals or during one missing children recoveries. Loaded gun was recovered. 15-year-old male juvenile had 2 warrants and suspected in multiple shootings and homicides. So there's a lot going on here. Why is this happening all at once? I mean, this seems kind of, if these were all organic and spontaneous and not connected in a way, how come the arrests are happening so damn rapidly? It's kind of weird that basically the DHS is all of a sudden basically tearing open this human trafficking stuff, which they used to just have to, the human trafficking things used to be more of a, Border Patrol trying to stop it from coming in, other teams and special forces in South America trying to figure out what's going on, and also Southeast Asia trying to stop, greater human trafficking. Eastern Europe was kind of its own animal, but we don't have as much of a footprint there. That's really where the human trafficking was. And, you would still, small towns would have to deal with, the local 15-year-old either being in a gang or being trafficked or something, because it was more of a localized problem, right? Because, somebody would get groomed by a gang or something, and then that's what would happen. This is different than that. This isn't even like the grooming gangs in London, where it was more of there's a complete cultural breakdown going on, and it has to do with the Pakistani Islamic community. This is actually some sort of transnational 179 arrests, Central Ohio, 20 children being this keeps happening over and over and over and over and over again. And I am wondering, is there more to what's going on here than what we were kind of initially being led onto? And is it linked to this Chinese stuff? Because now at this point, if you haven't seen the videos or at the least seen the screenshots, Hunter Biden was kid diddling. No nice way to put it. I won't bring up obviously the shots because I want to keep my account. But you can go to I think it's G News, which good luck finding that, or GTV, which is like the Chinese dissidents channel. Not the greatest videos. They have a lot of contributors who are not exactly, I don't want to say honest actors, but they talk big, and they're not like one of them is like, they end it by saying the CCP's goal is to wipe out all of humanity with the virus. No, we know that's not the case, because their goal is the expansion of the Chinese state to be basically ascendant, all encompassing. Like the communist utopia that Mao was seeking. It's not to wipe everybody out, because if you wipe everybody out, then that, what are you going to rule over? Maybe kill all the Americans or something. Maybe strategic application of force, but not total annihilation. If they want total annihilation, they would just fire all their nukes, and then that would do a pretty good job of starting the process of total annihilation. Anyway. But what they're tied into is what these Chinese are tied into is they're tied into the human trafficking stuff. And they're trafficking not just not just Chinese girls and boys, but Thai, other foreigners, other races, black, white, all kinds of different things going on here. That's international slave trade. That's the international sex slave trade. That's the international human trafficking that these fugitive apprehension strike teams, like these are the things that like basically the marshals have been dealing with, and DHS, which has access to. There's a lot of criticisms about DHS. For instance, I think the TSA should go away. But the fact that there's basically they have an eye essentially looking at what's going on internationally and what's going on domestically and how it's linked. And that all of a sudden, basically, these guys have been activated and they've been making busts like crazy. Whether it's Georgia, Ohio, Florida, I forget if it was Nevada, I think, or some of them, Texas. I'm wondering if this is tied into the Epstein stuff. Epstein, essentially, the way he made his money, and then what made him such a powerful threat to essentially the people he was blackmailing. Why basically the rug got pulled out from under him. He got cocky. He started to become more of a liability to whoever it was who was basically benefiting from him. He was more of a liability. And when he went to prison, and when the searching and all this other stuff occurred, it's not a matter of having to go take care of him yourself necessarily. He's going to get arrested because the good guys aren't going to be searching for him. So all you have to do is basically make it inconvenient for him, and then basically the good guys are eventually going to get to arrest him. They're not going to know you're pulling the strings, and if you kill him and you tie up the loose ends, then they have no way to continue the investigation. Epstein was human trafficking in much the same way that the CCP were, to the point where I'm wondering if it's actually connected. All right? Epstein was deeply tied to the Democrat Party, and he was doing the same things that the Chinese were doing, right? Chinese lured in a lot of people who were visiting China. Hunter Biden shows up, and they're like, yeah, here, come have a cocaine binge, basically, and here's some prostitutes, and now we got even more stuff to blackmail you on. Epstein, not all that much different. He's kind of the U.S. honeypotter guy. Oh, come to the island. Everything's going to be fine. Somebody like Alan Dershowitz might be completely innocent. Oh, yeah, I brought my family to the island. It's all just it doesn't matter. It's if you make it, if you make it seemingly safe, you can basically lead people in and then entrap them. And I'm wondering if that was basically the information. That was the money train. Was part of it was Epstein was effectively a subcontractor for the CCP and probably was selling to other states as well. And he had pretty much been completely blackmailing the Democrat Party, some Republicans and stuff, and it may have gotten out of control. He may have actually obtained way too much power, and the Chinese might have looked at him and they said, all right, we have everything we need, and we're running this ourselves. There's no reason to keep this guy around and risk essentially giving up the game. And the Democrats likewise might have said, he's got way too much control over us, take him out. Because everybody's got, he's got dirt on so many damn people. John Podesta, good example of just really sleazy. The Podesta emails, you read about that stuff and you're like, huh. I know they claim these terms and stuff mean nothing, but they mean something completely different when you realize the Bidens were tied up with human trafficking in through the use of the Chinese, and that's also not the only place that these videos came from. So, what's happening here? I think these stories are connected. And I think they're connected just because I've never seen the US Marshals make this many arrests this fast. And I'm saying, like, in a grander term, it seems like every month they have a new operation that picks up, a couple dozen kids and makes, over 100 arrests per location. This isn't even the first one of these that occurred in Ohio. Let's see where else we're talking about. Yeah, Jackson County, West Virginia. There's a lot of things going on here. And the U.S. Marshals are running around like crazy and launching essentially assaults to liberate slaves. How is this happening under our nose? who's backing this? You know, like who's making money doing this? You have to have there's got to be something to it, because they're saying they arrested 179 people, but then there's like the majority of the people they're talking about were Johns, so like customers. Where are these customers, and how are they knowing to go to the middle of central Ohio? Somebody has to be essentially marketing this stuff. What's happening here? And also, is that really for how sophisticated these operations are? Is there really that much money out there to purchase this, particularly within the United States, to make it worth the risk for what they're doing? Maybe, but it's very strange, to say the least. And I see this, and I see the U.S. Marshals making basically human trafficking arrests on the heels of all the human trafficking stuff that was happening overseas. Basically, the U.S. was going after it in South America and Southeast Asia. The CCP revelations tied in, and now you've got you had the Epstein situation, and then now basically the Democrats, they're tied both to Epstein and to the CCP. In fact, we have literally the vice president tied into the CCP, and his son tied in directly to the human trafficking stuff. Just he was a customer essentially, but he was utilized basically as blackmail, but he was utilized nonetheless. And I see this stuff, and I'm like, I would be extremely surprised if these things are not connected in more than just a superficial way. This is 3 major human trafficking stories. 1, human trafficking happening right under the U.S. nose at the point where the U.S. Marshals are actually making massive busts and massive raids. 2, Jeffrey Epstein, that whole saga, plus his death, that's a human trafficking story. 3, the CCP actually being actively involved with human trafficking basically as part of their blackmail scheme. I don't think this is coincidental. I don't see this coincidental. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that can just happen organically. If you were going to make money, why wouldn't you do hard drugs or opioids or just influence peddling in general? This all has the same it all has the same tone to it. It's like the strategy of Epstein and the strategy of the CCP being almost exactly the same. I don't think that's coincidental. I mean, how many child trafficking blackmail rings can there possibly be, right? And how many different arrests are the U.S. Marshals and raids able to make based on whatever this recent batch of intelligence is, where they've been basically doing this for about 2 years, where they've been kicking in doors and stuff, and it's getting more and more and more thing. And is it really any coincidence that basically they arrest Epstein and they start investigating the Chinese stuff, then all of a sudden they're making human trafficking bust? Like, the odds of these things not being at least in some way connected, in some way the intelligence overlapping, it seems pretty low to me. It seems pretty low to me. So that's the weird angle that I'm seeing. I get that there's there's probably more important elements to this than the specifics of essentially the human trafficking. I mean, the Bidens with the billions and billions of dollars moving, and the secrets moving, and just the fact that basically the Democrats are in bed with the CCP because they both have mutual interests, which is basically getting Democrats elected. That's scary and reprehensible. But that's really kind of the main story. This stuff is more of how do I put it? It's still very hypothetical, but I find it very interesting because a lot of people I don't think are paying attention to the fact that I think these things are more likely connected than not. Call that a conspiracy. It's fine. I'm strictly speculating because of what I see. And the way I've seen these things coming up, I've been right about this stuff before. And my instinct is that it's way too similar and way too it's just way too weird to not be overlapping, right? Because that's the thing. If you're making busts in Southeast Asia, you're going to come across who's taking. You're going to at least have a nice sniff of who's taking the kids. That's how they got to the Epstein's Island. South America, Southeast Asia, it was the international trafficking, and that led them basically to the Epstein stuff, plus a converging basically investigation domestically, the FBI moving at 10 miles an hour, but there was information there. And then that led to the stuff it led to. Epstein was obviously tipped off because he basically destroyed all the evidence on his island. But if you're going to see that, if you're able to pick up somebody like Epstein, you think that the agencies who are involved, or I should say, very least the people involved with this, weren't gonna at least notice that the CCP was also doing this type of trafficking? I mean, maybe they couldn't touch them. They can't go into China and start making arrests, obviously. But you think they were unaware of that? I don't think so. And I think that, it's not like these are two separate human trafficking operations organically appearing on different sides of the world. And not only that, but also next to each other. If you want to go to, if you want to get Southeast Asian slaves, you have to go through the Southeast Asian slave traders. If you want to get South American or Central American slaves, you have to go through the Central American slave traders. If you want to get, Caucasian, white, or American, you have to go through that criminal network. You're not going to have your own sources. So I have very little doubt that essentially Epstein is purchasing and trafficking from the same people the CCP were, if not doing it in basically for them as subcontracting. It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense for them not to have at least some sort of superficial interaction with whoever's basically doing the kidnapping and doing the selling. They're clients, because at the very least of them not being, if they were not working together, they would be competitors for the same stuff, right? Maybe they were competitors. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they weren't working together. Maybe Epstein actually, part of his deal was to actually, basically if he's going down, he was going to expose the Chinese operation as well. Maybe, I don't know. He's dead now. We don't know what his deal was. But I tend to think that they're probably more connected than not. That's the thing that's what I see here as the story is not being talked about. So, rambled on long enough. There's one more thing I want to touch on. Miles Taylor, former DHS assistant, just some asshole, comes out. And he says, oh, yeah, he's the one who wrote the anonymous book to bitch and complain. This is like their October surprise. It's really desperate, and it's dumb. This Bob Alinsky thing is so much more, it's so much more interesting and so much more impactful in what's going on than just like, I'm the one who actually complained. I endorse Biden. We don't care, Miles. Miles and his brother, however, his brother John Taylor, they are mentioned in the Podesta emails. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. Go to WikiLeaks. Go through the Podesta emails. Look up Miles Taylor, or just scroll through the Podesta emails. There's a lot of them. But if you look at Miles Taylor, I think it's John Taylor's his brother. There's an asset in New York and there's an asset in D.C. he talks about, and then he talks about the person who's handling the money named Frank. I don't know. More of this shady DNC Podesta bullshit. But this guy, they're acting. They wanted to act like this guy's like a rogue patriot who saw what the Trump administration was doing and was once a loyal Republican and now not. No, he was. It's a guy who was on the payroll for something for Podesta. Who the hell knows, right? A lot of these people in Washington D.C. have R's or D's next to their name just because that's who is going to be giving them the job, right? So they say, if you want to get hired by a Republican administration, you got to put the R. If you want to get hired by a Democrat administration, you got to put the D. Or you already had to have the R and be working for them in the meantime. It's hyper politicized. So somebody coming out and being a whistleblower, you have to really look at them with kind of a raised eyebrow, because just because they were, R or D, or they served for a certain amount of time, doesn't mean that they weren't just partisan hacks the whole time. Um, this is here's this is a little clip of Miles Taylor being interviewed back in August or say in August. Talking about his talking about the anonymous op-ed, and this is just again, this is one of those things where these people are just so full of shit and so full of themselves that it's laughable. So here's him when he's asked about the anonymous stuff that now he admits to that he did.
Op-ed, there was a book by someone calling themselves Anonymous. Are you aware of who that is?
I'm not. Look, and that was a parlor game that happened in Washington, D.C. of a lot of folks trying to think of who that might be. I've got my own thoughts about who that might be, but I want my focus to be on the president, and I certainly don't want to. I wear a mask for two things, Anderson: Halloweens and pandemics. So no.
Even Anderson Cooper's not buying it. It's funny. Look at this look he gives him. He's like, you're gonna eat this because you're gonna want to come out and act like you're the hero, and then this video is gonna show up and you're gonna look like a total jackass. So I thought that was amusing. And again, it's a little piece of the puzzle that ties back to the Podesta emails and all this other stuff. If Seth Rich will get killed for leaking emails, then I got news for you. Carlson having documents destroyed and hunted down it's not off the table. Two very, very high parties are at stake here: Democrat Party and the CCP, and they're going to lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what they need to get. So, people got to watch their back. Tucker's got to watch his back. Not that he's going to get killed, but documents like that just vanished on him yesterday or whenever it was. I guess whenever he was doing the interview with Bobulinski. Bobulinski, he said, he was offered FBI protection, and he apparently accepted some of it, but he's got his own SEAL team, basically ex-SEAL team, protecting him. That's probably smart because the idea that the basically FBI is going to, one, not have any corruption from the DNC, and two, not have any spies from the CCP, that's pretty much that's an impossible ask. If it goes to the FBI, it is not secret. We've always seen that the FBI can't keep, they can't even keep an investigation going. They lose evidence. They pretend they're doing their job and they're not. It's a total mess right now. There's nobody you can trust in DC. And there's no organization you can trust because, again, you've got two different organizations now that could be compromising them. One's the CCP and one is the DNC. It's the same way in the media too, I'm sure whoever leaked what was going on with Tucker Carlson was actually somebody at Fox. Somebody at Fox leaked to either the CCP or they leaked to the DNC. And what's funny about the foreign intelligence is that somebody might be leaking to the DNC or leaking to someone else who they think is completely innocuous, right? And that person's actually the one who is the spy, so the CCP or the DNC are actually getting the information. And the person who's leaking doesn't even know they're a leaker to begin with. That's the kind of stuff that does occur. So there's spy games going on. And we should keep watching this. And I think the story I'm going to keep my at least one eye on is the human trafficking stuff, because I find that the most unexplained in terms of, I think there's a connection here, and if there's not, I would be quite surprised, and we should get the details on this because this is the kind of stuff we have to stop. This isn't a drug war or anything like that. I don't care if Hunter Biden's doing lines of cocaine off a prostitute's back. I do care if that prostitute is 12 years old. That's pretty much where that extends. And if the CCP is running a blackmail operation, it's actually better that just this stuff is just released out to the public, because even if it's embarrassing for a lot of politicians, even if it does lots of damage to essentially U.S. credibility or politicians' I don't know, reputations, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off, right? We need to know if people are, maybe you were drugged. We need to know if you guys did this bad stuff. that has to be out in the open before we vote for you. Because if we vote for you and you're harboring the fact that some kind of scandal, basically the Chinese could release some kind of scandal on you, like for instance your kids, screwing, you know, 8-year-olds or whatever that was going on in the Biden video. We have to know ahead of time. We have to know ahead of time because it completely disqualifies, and this is why I think Joe Biden's on the money take. Yeah, okay, we do know he is because of what the Bobulinski revelations and whatnot. But there's a lot of people who are arguing, no, it's just Hunter Biden. It's not just Hunter Biden. It's Joe Biden, and let me explain why. It's Joe Biden because if it was just a matter of Hunter Biden getting honeypotted and being a troubled person, he could just come out and he could have released this immediately, and he could have had his embarrassing scandal back whenever it was, and no one would remember. But he's not. He held on to it. And he held on to it fully intending to become president of the United States while the Chinese held this over his head. And that's unbelievably irresponsible. It's not a matter of him not caring about it. It's a matter of him being okay with, essentially, he wants the power, he wants the money, and so what if he has to do the Chinese bidding every once in a while? The Chinese, it's kind of the perfect plan. You rope him in. You sucker the Democrat Party to nominating him. You control you control just the right amount of people to essentially influence things the way you want. You get the far left worked up just a little bit enough to kind of guide things. It's a mess. It's a mess, and the Democrats have to clear out the CCP. The Republicans, we've cleared out. We cleared out the CCP in a lot of ways inadvertently by just kicking out the neocons. The old guard got basically completely romped, and that just happened to also kick out the spies. In this case, we've got the more fiercely libertarian types now moving up the ladder, and they're harder to compromise. We have gays for Trump and stuff too, so there's no shame of things that people are hiding. We just don't care any. Like the GOP is much better about this kind of stuff. We don't care what people do in their private lives, so there's no we're gonna somebody can blackmail somebody saying by revealing they're gay. We just don't care. We're much better at. I should say we're in a much better position to resist essentially communist infiltration. Not to mention the fact that you would have to. If you were a Republican and you were a CCP spy, you'd have to. The only way they could get you is if they had blackmailed you, or if they were basically giving you so much damn money that you gave in, and that was how they basically bought you off. But in terms of walking the walk, if someone was actually a communist sympathizer, they would have to really. That would be really hard to blend in the Republican Party right now. Because the Republican Party, we don't have we have a lot more diversity of ideas than what the Democrats have, and if someone starts talking like a Marxist, we slap that down. That will make you look sideways at the person, and you won't be very popular within the GOP right now if you start talking like a communist. In the DNC, if you start talking like a communist, they just assume you're part of the AOC wing. You can be a full-throated communist supporter and working for the CCP and spreading your ideas totally normally, and no one would notice. You would just, you would just look like any other one of these nut jobs. And that's making the Democrats particularly vulnerable to what's going on, plus the fact that they still have the old guard. They've got their Joe Bidens, they've got their Nancy Pelosi's, they've got their John Podestas, they've got all these different people, Perez, that are all holdovers from literally the 90s, who the CCP have had that much time to corrupt, while the GOP is largely fresh. And I think that could be part of why we're seeing this split. We could be part of why the CCP is throwing everything they have at this election, because the Democrats are basically one they're only a couple years at most away from just having a complete collapse and a complete restructuring. Whether they emerge as more progressive and more left wing, and they move back to the center, or they just dissolve completely and then they split into like two parties, like the socialists and then the welfare state people. Something major is going to happen, and when that happens within the DNC, the Chinese now, all that investment they have, it's worth a lot less. And the GOP right now, the Chinese basically, any investment they had in the GOP collapsed when Donald Trump won. So that's part of what's going on here, and it's a tough situation. So I've gone on for long enough about that. Just pay attention to what's going on. Think about who benefits from what, and it's not as it's certainly not rosy, but it's certainly not hopeless. If the people get out and we reject this nonsense and we say, okay, you know what, the Democrats just smell wrong. Forget if you understand the CCP stuff or not. If you just can smell basically what's going on, the sulfur, as Alex Jones would say, hopefully enough people will be averse to what's unfolding to actually come out and be like, no, let's not do what they want, because it's something's off here. And this, hey, maybe China will collapse internally, because they can only keep that house of cards of blackmail running so long before they basically run out of people to blackmail, before they basically provide inherent amount of instability in their singular structural, their single party system. The United States, the Democrats can collapse. It doesn't matter. Just like how the Whigs collapsed back before the Civil War. It didn't matter. There was a Civil War, but the fact that the Whig Party disappeared essentially didn't affect the structure of the United States. If the Communist Party has a collapse in China, that is, well, goodbye Communist China. So maybe they've got the same pains that the Democrats have. Democrats are worried about collapsing, and now the kind of communist Chinese are worried about collapsing, and they're both running around making mistakes and doing the same kind of stuff because they're worried. Difference being China's got its entire country on the line, and the Democrats just like to convince themselves that the entire country's on the line. We'll see. We're in a good shape going forward, but man, do not underestimate their ability to cheat, lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what they want. So, I think the genie's out of the bottle. I don't think they can stop the Trump train at this point. But again, don't bet your life on it, and be ready, because this may not work out, and we may have a Democrat administration who the media is covering for, who is completely compromised by the Chinese. I mean, if Joe Biden gets elected, that's what's going on here, It's compromised by the Chinese. We know this now as a fact. This isn't the Russian conspiracy where we gotta just make shit up and talk about piss tapes and stuff. No, this is real. We have the real tapes. We know about the money transfers. We've got multiple eyewitnesses with receipts, like Bob Alinsky. This is bad. This is really bad. But I'm hoping to God that there's enough people who are like soft Biden who see this, and now it smells bad enough. They don't have to go out and vote Trump, but at least they're going to probably go, all right, I should stay home and not, I don't like whatever's happening here, because, it seems really bad. This is not the progressive dream, I should say. But it is telling how like people like AOC come out and they're just like, oh yeah, we're totally gonna they're attaching their lying to this sinking ship, which is the old guard of the Democrats, which the Chinese have basically attached themselves to, and I it's foolish, and it's a part of me is like, oh, why are they doing that? Are they in on the corruption? No, I don't think AOC's in on the corruption. I think she's just an idiot. I just think she's an idiot. She thinks she's smarter than she is, and that she can stop this ship from sinking. No, she can't. She can't. She shares some of the same ideals as the communist Chinese. Maybe that's why she doesn't see them as enemies. But she should know the ship's on fire, and she better, she should be getting in the lifeboat, not saying, "Oh, I'm in charge now." It's not gonna help you, you know. And the Chinese aren't gonna hand over their investment to you. It's comical. They'll use her. I doubt she's actually smart enough to even be used as a Chinese asset. You've got Talib and Omar. Yeah, they're Muslim Brotherhood adjacent. They're Muslim Brotherhood assets, for lack of a better term. But they're also a lot smarter, and they're also capable of running fraud operations on their own. AOC is not capable of running a video tutorial without looking like a total jackass. People like her, she's kind of like a pop star. She sounds like Cardi B, who just makes shit up and just people like idiots. People like people who have like a celebrity presence. Even back in the day when Trump would just run his mouth, the kind of shit he would get away with, it was like, yeah, okay, pal, you're not that great on this stuff. But people are attracted to celebrity, and that seems to be the new DNC strategy. Their Betos, their AOCs. But these idiots, they've anchored themselves to the old guard of the Democrat Party, and as goes them, I think they realize so they're going to actually get affected pretty negatively as well. So this would be a really good time for AOC to turn around and stab Pelosi and all these other people involved in the corruption in the back and say, I had nothing to do with this. I want to be the new face. I'm not corrupt, right? If she had any sense of tactical strategy, she would know now's the time to turn on them. Go ahead, basically punt the election right now and just say, okay, don't be voting for Joe Biden. We'll just say we'll try to remove Trump with adding judges to the court or something. I don't know. Just make some shit up and assert yourself as the new moral leader of the party, because the Democrats, you dance for the old guard like a monkey, and they clap and they pat you on the head, and then they just go do whatever the hell they want, and they keep the old stuff up. It's kind of humiliating it's humiliating to even watch. You're just like, God, this lady's being played so hard by her own people. But whatever, that's what they do. So I was almost an hour talking about this insanity. I'm tired. I'm mentally exhausted from trying to track these stories all at the same time. It's so much happening so fast. It's just overwhelming. And that's my 2 cents. The main thing I'm adding here, again, it's the human trafficking stuff. Just keep an eye on that. The last thing I want is the election to be won, and then everybody to say, okay, fight's over, let's go home. No, fight's not over. I'm not saying you got to throw Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in jail. I'm not saying you even have to. Oh, excuse me. I'm not even saying you have to throw Hunter Biden in jail. It's kind of uncivil. To just kind of seek revenge. But what we need to do is we need to basically say, okay, well, major U.S. political party compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese Communist Party actively trying to undermine the U.S. elections through both, using the DNC and also using, their own methods and hacking, all this other crap, and buying ads. Man, just we can't just let this. We can't go back November 4th, even with a resounding Trump victory, and say, okay, I guess things are back to normal now. They're not, because this stuff has all been exposed, and we're gonna have to fight this. We're gonna have to keep fighting the human trafficking. We're gonna have to keep fighting the corruption. We're gonna have to keep fighting smug assholes like this. It's not over. They're not gonna just give up. The best we can hope for is that the Chinese cut and run. That's the best we can hope for. But the Democrat Party, if you're a Democrat, you should be working to just completely destroy the apparatus. Now, I got a feeling the Republicans would be dealing with the same exact problem if the neocons were still in charge. Like if the Bush era stuff and all those people were still basically there was continuity from them all the way to the Trump administration. I got a feeling we'd be dealing with this, maybe not as bad, but with a similar level and similar style of corruption with the Chinese, with the CCP. Because you're CCP, why wouldn't you try? You know, sure, the Democrats are more sympathetic to your cause, but you know, you wouldn't try to then not have the opposition party in your pocket. It's dumb. That would be stupid. That'd be a waste of their resources. But it's kind of funny, you know. It seems like the wheels are coming off right now. Their whole operation is starting to basically be exposed in front of us, piece by piece by piece by piece. And it's going to be media people. It's going to be. I mean, that'd be hilarious if it's essentially that they're able to backtrack through the Podesta emails and then they figure out basically who's been compromised by the Chinese. Podesta's probably been compromised by the Chinese, to be honest. You know? Oh, he wants UFO disclosure. He wants this stuff from the military. He wants to know the secret projects. Yeah, no wonder they're not telling him. Right? It's weird how these stories end up getting connected. Maybe that's why I find them interesting, because it's far more interesting in a lot of ways than sometimes the fictional conspiracies are. You know, the UFO stuff and all the wacky stuff is it's fun, but this actually has consequence, right? Why isn't the military giving up the goods on basically unidentified flying objects? Well, this corruption right here might be a really good example of why not, right? Even if there is aliens, right? Let's pretend part of the conspiracy is true and that they're actually covering up the existence of extraterrestrials or whatever, something, you know, advanced technology that's not human under this earth. You think that they'd be revealing that to, you know, people in a party who possibly could be compromised by the Chinese? You think the people with the most top level security clearances at Lockheed and Boeing and stuff, who have had, you know, tons and tons of material stolen by the Chinese, and they're completely paranoid about basically the Chinese and Russians spying on them, that they're going to just instantly say, oh, you see, you're an elected official, so we trust you. You know, the military, you know, top secret black operations guys, black project guys, engineers, career guys, you know. You think they're gonna just give up the goods on all the you know, the secret technology just because somebody's an elected official? Of course not. They don't trust them. And this is the kind of reason why. I mean, if John Podesta, let me put it this way, if John Podesta if the military was resisting basically telling John Podesta the truth on UFOs or whatever it is, and now, you know, as John Podesta says, it's 100% justified. It's 100% justified. Oh, Harry Reid, I tried to get disclosure, and you didn't get it. You know why you didn't get it? This is why. We have to deal with our enemies, and you are not trustworthy. This shit with the Chinese was happening right under your nose, and then you expect us to believe that, oh, you're going to somehow expose the secret cover-up with UFOs and stuff, right? It's nonsense. If you can't run your own ship, that they're not going to trust you with the information to tell you what the black projects are, or if there even is, you know, something being covered up on that, with that level of consequence. You really, and you know what, you don't deserve to know. I mean, God, I mean, just the level of infiltration is just unbelievable. So, all right, I'm approaching an hour. Hopefully you know, just kind of watch this in the background of whatever you were doing, playing your games. But have a good evening.